welcome you here to the Arabian Sports Talk here on 91.7 WEEM. If this is your first time tuning in, alongside Ryan Davis, Lucas Card, and Aiden Wilson, I'm your host, Dawson Perrell. We got a packed episode for you folks here today. We'll be looking back, recapping the past week of sports. Of course, the big event on the sports schedule was the NFL draft. It started last Thursday, ended last Saturday. So we'll be recapping that, going pick by pick, really just giving our reactions for that. If we have some extra time, we might look at the NBA playoffs, looking at that first round, but the NFL draft might cover all the time we have. So starting off, of course, with that first pick of the draft that belonged to the Carolina Panthers. They went with Bryce Young, a quarterback out of Alabama. No surprise there. He was definitely the consensus number one, especially after C.J. Stroud got into some trouble the week before the draft. We'll talk about that here in a second, but no surprise there. So we'll just move forward to that second pick, of course, that being C.J. Stroud out of Ohio State. Texans went with the quarterback there. There were some questions. You look at C.J. Stroud that week before, I'm pretty sure on the S2 test, which is basically just football IQ test, he scored an 18%, which is the lowest we've seen from a top prospect in quite a while. So that definitely raised a lot of questions. Is he the second best quarterback in the draft? But the Texans went with him. I saw a lot of social media fans not too happy. I think he was the second best. I argued that he was better than Bryce Young, but nevertheless, I think Texans, that was a good pick still. No crazy surprise there. I think a lot of people predicted that even after that score result got leaked. So overall, I'd say not the craziest pick. And then, of course, after that, Texans right back on the clock when they traded back up to 3, traded with the Cardinals. And a lot of people said they overpaid. They gave up a first for next year, a third for next year, their 12th pick and a third. I'm pretty sure that was the package. It's their second for this year. Overall, I'd say they might have overpaid, but Will Anderson Jr. is a beast. In my opinion, he's the best player in this draft. Of course, Texans have been really needing a playmaker on defense ever since they lost J.J. Watt. And I think although they might overpay just because next year they might be a top 5 pick, and that'll definitely hurt if next year you're still on those bottom 5 teams and you don't have that pick. So we'll see. But as of now, I'd say it wasn't a horrible decision for him.
Yeah, that was a big surprise to me to see Houston going back up to 3 right after they had that second overall pick, excuse me. But, I mean, Arizona really didn't need that big of a player on defense at that moment. I mean, it was smart for them to get Will Anderson. Will Anderson's a stud player.
Yeah.
And, I mean, Arizona went back to, 13, 12, and they traded back up to 6.
Yeah.
I think it was a great move by Arizona getting out of that top 3 situation because they really couldn't address any of their major needs at the 3 position. You would have had to reach on an offensive lineman or take the best available player. So you got some value out of that pick, and you fell to 12, but then you got even more value by trading with the Lions at 12 to get to 6.
I mean, I think the Texans did do good for their draft. As we know, they aren't a very good team, but getting somebody very strong on the offensive side, as in C.J. Stroud and then Will Anderson, I think they did give up a little bit too much, but I have some hopes for them going forward, maybe the next 2 to 5 years. I can see something really solid.
Yeah, and you look for the Cardinals side of things with that trade. I think that was a great move for the Cardinals. Of course, as you were mentioning, Lucas, they didn't really need anyone at that spot just yet, and they were looking to trade down for quite a while. I know they were definitely picking up a lot of phone calls, but I guess not many teams wanted to offer as much as they wanted, but the Texans threw an offer at the table that they liked. So, of course, as I was mentioning, it was a very controversial trade. I think it was worth it, but in the long run, I mean, the Texans, they need immediate success, but for the future, considering you still got a lot of holes in the roster and you're projected to be a bottom or a top 5 pick next year as well, I think that could hurt. I saw some mock draft for a very early 2024 mock draft where the Cardinals had the top 2 picks, which I don't even know the last time if that happens. So we'll move forward now to the 4th pick of the draft. That belonged to, of course, the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts, we talked about them in our podcast episode 2 weeks ago about them just really needing a quarterback. Of course, that was their number one need. I think these Colts fans were so bored of this cycle of veteran quarterbacks, and they needed a playmaker, and that's exactly who they got with Anthony Richardson. In my opinion, this is a risky pick. He's a boom or a bust. I think this is a huge task for the Colts front office. I think pretty much this guy's entire career stands on the Colts front office. I think if their head coach, their GM, their offensive coordinator. I think if they play it right, Anthony Richardson could be an absolute beast quarterback. But if they mess it up, he could be a huge flop. If he stays healthy, my projection is Richardson could be a 1,000-yard rusher opening up. I mean, he's very athletic, arguably more athletic than Lamar. I mean, obviously, maybe not as fast, but he definitely has some strength as well, Anthony Richardson. So I think he'll struggle in the air. But for the Colts, I mean, if you just stick to the ground game, you don't focus too much on the air, I think Anthony Richardson will definitely be a contender for that Offensive Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, I'm not going to be surprised if the Colts are going to be a mainly running team next year. They have, 3 tight ends that are over 6'5", maybe. I mean, they have a lot of size. They have Jonathan Taylor in the backfield. Anthony Richardson, great runner also. But, I mean, as you said, on the throw, he's not that good. But I feel like over time, having a little bit more experience in the NFL will get him there.
So I feel like for the first couple weeks, they might just put Anthony Richardson in the red zone inside the 20, maybe halfway through drives, and have Gardner Minshew play the primary starter position just to get a little bit solid under his belt, just to see what he can do in practice and stuff.
Obviously, Anthony Richardson is going to be a development project.
Oh, yeah.
As we know, in the combine, he was listed as an athlete, not really a quarterback. He doesn't have too many games played either, only 24 in college and only a 54% completion rate. So I think it is going to be a challenge for the Colts to solidify him at that quarterback position, but I think if we give it a couple years, he can be a modern-day Cam Newton type of quarterback.
Yeah, definitely a lot of comparisons to Cam Newton, of course. But I think, in my opinion, Anthony Richardson is the type of quarterback that in order to develop him well, you just have to throw him in the fire. Yeah. He'll adjust, and he has the athletic, he has the athlete, he has the physicality to really get in there and do well. It's just that experience in the air, and in my opinion, he'll definitely struggle. That'll be holding him back. But I think, again, if you just throw him in the fire, I almost would rather the Colts do that rather than train him underneath, I don't know, Gardner Minshew. Yeah. I think right now on ESPN, at least, Anthony Richardson is at least typed in as the backup. I don't know who exactly. I don't know if the Colts GM submits that to ESPN or what, but at least on ESPN, he's the backup. So it's going to be interesting to see over this offseason where Anthony Richardson goes up and down on the Colts depth chart. But moving on to the 5th pick, of course, to the Seahawks. They drafted Devon Witherspoon. This one, in my opinion, wasn't the best pick. I saw a lot of people that liked it, and I understand how Witherspoon is a great corner. He's a lockdown that can get it done. He's a very lengthy guy. And Seahawks, I mean, you look back, of course, to that Legion of Boom, and they really like their lengthy defenders. Of course, Richard Sherman is pretty much a definition of a lengthy receiver. I think he was, 6'4", 6'3" type of dude. So I think Witherspoon, I'm not sure exactly his measurables, but I think he is a pretty lengthy dude that can definitely dive for passes. He definitely likes to do that. But he was a solid addition to the secondary, but I don't think he was the best player on the board. No, I don't think, nor I think he was the best position they needed to fill. I think Jalen Carter, of course, was on there. I think there might have been a red flag with his off the field, but I think Jalen Carter would have been a better pick. Maybe Tyree Wilson, because I think that defensive line, you look at it, you got Draymond Jones, Brian Moan, and Jaron Reed. Like, I don't know one of those guys. I've never heard of them, and that's their starting defensive line. So I think maybe not the best pick, but if it works out, I think the Seahawks could have one of the better secondaries in the league.
Yeah, I mean, Devon Witherspoon, as you said, is a stud cornerback. Did a lot of things in Illinois, but I mean, I'm the only thing I really am concerned of is you said D-line, but also how many more years do you have of Geno Smith?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like they're questioning that a little bit, but then they also did have what pick was it? Can't remember what pick. They had another one, I think.
Yeah, it was their original pick, because that 5th was the Broncos. I think they had the 20th was theirs. So they went with GSN.
Yeah, I mean, Jackson Smith-Njigba is is a solid one. So I feel like they were really wanting Devon Witherspoon on that side, and then getting Jackson Smith-Njigba. I feel like they really thought about it, and maybe they know something that we don't.
I feel like they could have made a better decision than Witherspoon, because Witherspoon's not your tallest corner out of the draft. He's only 6 foot, and most of the receivers in the NFC are around 6'2" to 6'5".
Yeah, and nowadays corners are going to be like even taller, you know, so that 6 foot is definitely smaller nowadays.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, I saw him listed at 5'11 and a half, weighing in at 180. I feel like if he can get a little bit bigger, like width-wise. He could be a stable corner. But for the Seahawks, I mean, they have some pretty good receivers. DK Metcalf could be argued to be almost a veteran now. They got T.Y. Hilton. No, who do they have? Noah Fant as their tight end, and then Tyler Lockett. Yeah. So I feel like they could have improved on the running back position as well because they have who? Chris Carson?
No, they got the rookie for last year. Oh my gosh, Lucas, what is his name?
Walker.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They're rookie.
Kenneth
I think
Walker.
they're good at their running back
he
position.
actually is pretty solid.
Didn't Chris
But-
Carson retire?
Yeah, I think he's gone.
Yeah, I think it was like his 5th year and he retired.
But yeah, Ryan, as you said, their quarterback Geno Smith, he is getting pretty old. I know that Will Levis was very controversial, but I feel like they just shouldn't have gone with Devon Witherspoon. Maybe he'll work out for them, but I feel like it was too high for them to pick him.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, again, that quarterback situation, you look at their draft, they didn't draft a single quarterback, which surprised me. I thought Seahawks were almost a lock to be a team that waited a couple rounds, maybe went with like a Hendon Hooker later on, or even like farther down the list with like Aiden O'Connell out of Purdue or Stinson Bennett or someone down the way, but they didn't go with the quarterback at all. So I think they're definitely putting a lot of confidence in Geno Smith. But again, I think it was an okay pick, but maybe not the best that they could have gone for on the board. So, of course, moving on now to that 7th, looking up who that went to. Who did that go to again?
The 6th went to Arizona.
Yeah, 6. Sorry. So the Cardinals, you just as we mentioned, the Cardinals traded up. And the Cardinals, as we were just talking about, that trade with the Texans brought them down a bit. But again, I think the Cardinals, their biggest needs is really that edge side of things. I think the offensive line could have been a talk, but I think that edge was a big thing. Of course, they eventually went with Paris Johnson Jr. out of Ohio State with that offensive tackle, which I don't necessarily hate. I think at this point, the Cardinals are still locked in on Kyler Murray. I mean, I still think as of now, he's their franchise quarterback. I think maybe if this downward trend for Arizona continues, there's going to be some question marks in the quarterback room. But as of now, I think you want to build around Murray and your quarterback position. And nowadays with the tackles, I mean, with mobile quarterbacks, tackles have such a different job than they did 20 years ago when mobile quarterbacks weren't so often. I think nowadays tackles are going to be more on the offensive. They're going to push defenders back to give their quarterback that are able to run around rather than defend more. So I think it was a good pick. You want a dominant tackle. I think Paris Johnson Jr. might not have been the best tackle, in my opinion. Personally, I was expecting them to go with an edge rusher at this pick, or if they went with an offensive tackle, Peter out of Northwestern. But again, I think he was a great pick, and man, he's definitely a big guy as well.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe Paris Johnson Jr. wasn't the best pick for the tackle, as you said, Peter Skoronski. I felt like he was going to go to Arizona when I was watching. I thought they were just going to pick Peter, but they didn't. I mean, Paris Johnson Jr. was on probably the best O-line in the league in the college football last year. It was so hard to get CJ Stroud, and you saw at Georgia, they were struggling to get to CJ Stroud in that game.
Yeah, I feel like they could have went with various different directions with this pick. Jalen Carter fell into their laps, but they decided not to pick him, which would have probably been the best available on the board. And I'm surprised they didn't. I get why you need an offensive line, because that Arizona's offensive line was awful last season, but so was their defense, and Budda Baker currently went out of there. And Byron Murphy Jr. says he also wants to leave. So.
I mean, yeah, I get why they traded down from 3, and I think it was a good reason to, but I feel like Paris Johnson Jr. maybe shouldn't have been the pick, or at least as high as he was. I know he is a very solid offensive line, only gave up 2 sacks in 3 years of college, but I feel like there was better available, and I can understand why they did pick him, though, because Dawson, as you were saying, Kyler Murray, he is their franchise quarterback. And I feel like they need to protect him more. But as I was saying, Paris Johnson, I think that he went just a little bit too high.
Yeah, again, they traded down originally to that 12 spot, but then they traded up again to the 6. So I think, that's a very good point. I think Paris Johnson Jr. probably would have been available at the 12. I don't see any of these teams before the 12th pick selecting him. I mean, Titans maybe. I mean, they went with a tackle. But so if you liked Paris Johnson Jr. that much, I could see why they did it. But I just don't know if it was the move for them. And then On top of that, I think, as Ryan was mentioning, I think, sure, the Cardinals need to build around him, but that defense is lacking as well. So we're going to move on now to the 7th pick in the draft that belonged to the Raiders. They went with edge out of Texas Tech, Tyree Wilson. And I love this pick. Of course, Tyree Wilson, in my opinion, had the best outfit of the draft. He was looking pretty nice on draft night walking up to the stage. And I think he was the guy that picked up Roger Goodell. Yeah, he pretty much threw him. So that was funny, but we won't really stay much on that one. I think it was a good pick, was the bottom line. But moving on to the 8th, arguably one of the most surprising picks up to this point. I think really outside of that first pick, as soon as that first pick was called, the draft just went into chaos. I think that was like the first one that was, all right, this one should be easy to tell. And then after that, it was just unpredictable. Yeah. And the 8th pick definitely confirmed that as the Falcons went with the running back Bijan Robinson out of Texas. Of course, Robinson, I think he's going to be a star. I think he, out of this entire draft class, I think he's the one that I would lock. He is going to be a star in the NFL. But I think, was it the move for the Falcons? I think they still have a lot of holes to fill, bigger holes to fill. Outside of the running back spot, you still have Cordell Patterson, who is a very solid running back, a veteran in the backfield. And, of course, Tyler Algier, I'm not sure how to say his name, something like that, the younger guy. So I think with those two, I think you were okay, at least for now. And then on top of that, Robinson, he wasn't really projected to go like top 10. I mean, you don't see many running backs to go top 10. I think this was the highest a running back was picked probably since Saquon in that 2018 draft. And obviously, Falcons saw something in him again. I think he'll be a star, but I just don't know if it was their number one hole, which in the end, that's all about the draft is. It's not the best player, it's just what you need the most.
Yeah, I mean, Bijan Robinson, as you said, is great. But, I mean, Desmond Ridder, do you really want to have him as your starting quarterback for however long?
Yeah.
I mean, Will Levis was still on the board, but it was I wasn't.
We know how that went.
Yeah, going all the way down. But I mean, Bijan Robinson, you have Cordell Patterson, as you said, getting a little old, and I don't know how much that second string running back really did a whole lot for them last year.
I feel like they could have went various different directions because now Bijan Robinson is going to be the 5th highest paid running back in the NFL, just behind Saquon Barkley and a couple other guys. So I don't feel like it's the best need for the Falcons because you already had 2 very talented running backs, and now you have the quarterback battle between Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke, which are both very good quarterbacks, but they're not star caliber quarterbacks, and Will Levis probably would have been the smarter pick here.
I feel like the league knows something about Will Levis that we don't.
Yeah, that's what I was
just because. I mean, boy, he was projected to go.
Yeah, there was some talk he'd go number
top one.
Like,
yeah,
there was definitely some rumors.
And he fell to what, second or third round?
Second round.
Yes,
second round. I mean, yeah, as he came in as a pretty high prospect, going second round, I feel like Will Levis was the pick here. But you argue if the Falcons picked Bijan because, as the Eagles lost Miles Sanders this offseason, they're a very competing team, and I feel like they just need that running back spot and maybe somebody on the line, but eventually they got those people anyways. So you wonder if Atlanta picked Bijan just to keep the Eagles from not getting him.
Yeah, and as you're mentioning, I think that is very true that Will Levis, there's something that the NFL scouts out there definitely going on in the draft room that we didn't really know too much, as the media didn't know and the fans didn't know. But yeah, as Lucas was mentioning, I mean, contracts nowadays for rookies are insane, as he got $23.7 million over 5 years, which is insanely high. As you mentioned, what would you say, 5th among rookies, but it's 8th among the class. So he's all the way down to 8th, which is absolutely absurd to say that. Like, you're getting paid 23.7 as a rookie over 5 years, but at the same time, you're 8th in the class. But moving on now to the 9th pick, of course, this one, Aiden, you're very happy about. Your Philadelphia Eagles got Jalen Carter out of Georgia, and that's really just the new football joke. You could say the new football meme is just the Philadelphia Bulldogs, because they're just basically going, which I love it. I love the strategy. I think the Eagles front office are saying, well, we might as well draft the entire Georgia defense. I mean, they're arguably the best college defense of all time. We might as well just transfer them over to the NFL, and that's exactly what I think their mindset was heading in. They definitely wanted Jalen Carter. Of course, they were originally at the 10 spot, but they swapped up to the 9th pick with the Bears. The Bears moved down to 10. I think they were less scared that the Bears would take him, because obviously the Bears could take who they want, and then the Eagles would be left with the next pick. But I think they were more scared that some other team will jump up the board, because I'm sure that Bears war room was getting a ton of calls about moving up to get Jalen Carter. But the Eagles had the best offer on the table, and with the Bears only moving down 1 pick, I think that was fine with them. And of course, This is definitely the hands down, at least according to me, this is the hands down biggest deal in the draft. I mean, Jalen Carter, outside of the off the field troubles we've mentioned, which I think was a red flag for a lot of those top 10 teams. I think outside of that, a lot of people had him at number 1 on the board. I know PFF, he was the number 1 prospect in the entire draft. So I think Jalen Carter was a great pick. And on top of that, you have a lot of veteran pieces in the backfield to build him around, which is it's crazy to say, but he might not be starting on that first day. Of course, you still got the big guy. What's his name out of Georgia as well? The younger Jordan Davis. You got Jordan Davis, Fletcher Cox. You got that defensive line is looking crazy. So it's going to be interesting to see where he lands heading into that week 1. But great pick from there, Ryan. You can go ahead and give your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, how many Georgia players do they have on that D line? 5.
Yeah,
I think 5.
Now after the draft, because they added 3 in the draft.
Yeah, and then Jalen Carter, one of the most dominant players on that defensive line for Georgia. I mean, you couldn't stop that Georgia defense. Even Ohio State had trouble. But I mean, I was surprised when I saw Jalen Carter dropping down that much.
Yeah, I think Jalen Carter, if he didn't have that off the field issue, he probably would have been gone in the top 5.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't have dropped all the way down to 9. But he'll be a great fit with the Eagles overall.
And as we were saying earlier, I mean, the Seahawks, they were expected to pick him in early mock drafts. But as we go back to the Eagles, I mean, they drafted Kelly Ringo from the Georgia as well. And then they got Tyler Steen also from Alabama. So, I mean, they drafted 4 prospects just from Alabama alone. No, not from Alabama, from Georgia. And then Jalen Carter, arguably the best prospect and have the most raw talent, leading Georgia in sacks and tackles for the past 2 years. Yeah. I mean, I feel like he could be a starter day 1, but just with the amount of veterans that we do have on that line, I feel like he won't be. And as we go back to the off-field problems, obviously as we have team chemistry with Georgia and then all these veterans on the Eagles, I feel like that is a main reason why the Eagles did pick him, just because the veteran experience, like, talking down to a new rookie, you can get them back in line. And I feel like Jalen Carter has the potential to be very good in this league, and I think the veterans on that team will help him prosper to that.
Yeah, but moving on over to that 10th pick in the draft, this one was drafted by the Bears. It was all the way originally belonged to the New Orleans Saints, was the 10th spot, but then, of course, traded to Philadelphia, traded to the Bears. And the Bears went with Darnell Wright here out of Tennessee. This one, definitely a questionable pick here. You look at PFF, his stats. I think he's 64.3 PFF grade, which if you don't know, that's pretty low. I think Paris Johnson was around like the 85, 86, and even that was a questionable pick. So I think the Bears, I don't know exactly what they were thinking here. You look back on Darnell Wright's college career. I was listening to the PFF podcast about the draft review yesterday, and they were saying he started out on right tackle for Tennessee, moved over to left tackle. He struggled, moved back to right tackle, and the last year he did okay. So that PFF grade might be a bit misunderstanding because really those first 2 college seasons where he struggled, but he really got it together that last season. So I think that last year his PFF grade rose quite a bit. So I think this was a solid pick. I think the Bears, I think you got the right position with an offensive tackle. Yeah. Again, we were just talking about it with Kyler Murray. With these scrambling quarterbacks, tackles are such a need because obviously tackles are on the 2 ends of the offensive line. And for scrambling quarterbacks that likes to run around, those 2 ends are going to be essential to get those open and free for the quarterback to move around. So I think they got the right position, just not the right player. I think I would rather see Peter Skoronsky here.
Yeah, I was surprised when they went with Darnell Wright with Speedy Skoronsky still on the board. I mean, Justin Fields has a lot of talent. I mean, one of the best out there for fantasy, running for what? He had over 1,000 yards last year.
Yeah, I think he maybe
a little bit lower.
Maybe a bit.
Yeah, he was close. And I mean, he had one of the worst O-lines in the league.
Yeah.
And when you put him behind a good O-line and you have now DJ Moore, Chase Claypool, and what's his name? I can't. Darnell Mooney. I'm pretty sure who it is.
I think so.
Yeah, those 3 wide receivers are going to be pretty good if they give Justin Fields enough time in the pocket.
Yeah, he had
a good O-line.
1,100, so he did break that 1,000.
Yeah.
I feel like it was the right position, but not the right player. You had Broderick Jones as well, and Peter Skoronsky, 2 very good players that you could have took before, but I feel like their pick with Darnell Wright, he's very versatile in playing both tackle spots. So if you need him at either one,
Yeah.
he can fill the void.
Yeah, and that was definitely a big
Yeah.
thing. Again, looking back to that PFF podcast I was listening to, that was a big thing they pointed out, Lucas, is where this guy can play pretty much anywhere. And nowadays, really that guard tackle spot is even interchangeable. So I think that was a solid pick on the side of things where he can play any spot.
I mean, yeah, Dawson, as you were saying, he can fill in. So I feel like it was a safe draft pick, but I feel like it was mediocre for the 10th pick. I mean, as he ranked 22 in the class, going number 10 is a bit of a reach. He allowed 8 hurries as his in total in his college career. So I feel like the Bears did need somebody on that line for Justin Fields, but I feel like he wasn't worthy of the 10th pick.
Yeah, but over to the 11th pick, we'll kind of rush through a couple picks here, running low on time. But of course, Peter Skoronski gets it. I think Titans here were almost like, he's still on the board. Okay, let's take him. I'm pretty sure this might have been one of the fastest times that a team was on the clock, because I think they were they were expecting the Bears. I'm sure they were expecting the Bears would go with Skoronski, but they took him. I think that's a great pick for them. Of course, they needed offensive line help, and Derrick Henry. I mean, sure, he's coming to age, but he's still Derrick Henry, and he'll do what he needs to do in the backfield. So I think that was a very solid pick. We'll move forward. Don't really stay too much on that. Of course, another very surprising pick here at the 12, belonging to the Detroit Lions. They went with Jahmyr Gibbs out of Alabama. Gibbs, definitely not too high on a lot of people's boards. I think, and on top of that, the Lions' running back room is very full. Of course, at the time, they still had Swift, they still had Montgomery, and on top of that, they added Gibbs. Of course, they traded away Swift to the Eagles, which we'll talk about here. But I think it was definitely a bad pick, in my opinion. That's the bottom line. I can see what the Lions were doing, and based on the draft room's reaction, I remember seeing on social media after they drafted Gibbs, they were freaking out. They were so happy. So I think, again, this might be a situation where they know something that the media and the fan don't really know about Gibbs. And I think Gibbs is a monster, but 12 is very high for a running back still. And the second running back off the board, 12, that might be the highest in quite a while. The running back 2 has gone off the board. But again, I'd say the bottom line, I give this pick around a 3-4 out of 10.
Yeah, I mean, it was a surprise because Alabama, they thought Jahmyr Gibbs was going to go second round.
Yeah,
what a lot of people had.
Second, third.
I mean, going from Alabama's pretty, I can't remember.
They got a lot of running backs. They definitely produce a lot of running backs, that's for sure.
They're
they
very
reliable,
reliable on their picks. And I mean, I think they might have been thinking about DeAndre Swift trade already.
Yeah, I'm
maybe
sure they
trade
were.
talks and just not out to the media yet. But I feel like it could be a good pick, having one of the best O-lines in the league right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're very underrated.
Yeah.
Jahmyr Gibbs might have been a reach at 12 just because he wasn't supposed to go till the second round, and the size. He's only 5'9", so he does have the burst of speed. He's like a DeAndre Swift, but you just paid Devin Montgomery that 3-year, $25 million contract.
Mm-hmm.
So you already had a very talented running back there.
Well, Ryan, as you were saying, maybe they were thinking ahead for that trade to the Eagles. I mean, we know that the Eagles were shopping for a running back, wanting Bijan, obviously, earlier in the draft. And then they had some talks about Derrick Henry. But as they settled for DeAndre Swift, you wonder if they did know something, or maybe they were just excited to draft that running back in order to trade DeAndre Swift. Yeah,
and I'm sure DeAndre Swift watching it at his house was probably a big concern, because he saw we drafted a running back. I think at that point he knew he was going to be gone pretty fast, and of course he went. But we'll move forward here down the list a bit. A player that I wanted to point out, at least the spot in the draft I wanted to point out, with the 16th pick belonging to the Commanders, they went with Emmanuel Forbes, cornerback out of Mississippi State. Off the bat, this pick wasn't really looked at as a good pick because Christian Gonzalez was still on the board. He was picked right after him with the 17th selection by the Patriots, and I think a lot of people had Gonzalez not only high on the boards, but a lot of people had him as their number 1 cornerback. So I think it was definitely a surprise that you went with Forbes instead of Gonzalez. But I wanted to point out here a couple fun facts for y'all. Forbes, of course, at Mississippi State, he's a very long guy. I think he had around either 4 or 6 pick sixes at his career with Mississippi State. He's almost a wide receiver, a cornerback type of guy. And on top of that, I'm pretty sure I saw somewhere that the Commanders, 2 draft directors, they're both past cornerbacks. So they know the position, and I think they must have saw something out of Emmanuel Forbes. So I love this pick personally. I think Forbes will be a beast. I think arguably he'll be better than Gonzalez, and people will look back on this pick and say the Commanders made the right move. But then again, Bill Belichick, I think they saw get Forbes, and then they were like, oh, they didn't pick Gonzalez. Let's pick him another one of those situations. Almost like when you're drafting in fantasy and the person picking after you was like, oh, we didn't pick him, and you feel kind of bad. So I think the Patriots went with the right move there. But again, I think Forbes will probably be just as good, if not better, than Gonzalez.
Yeah, I mean, coming out of Mississippi State, they weren't thinking a whole lot out of a whole lot of people from Mississippi State. That might be why he wasn't looked at a whole lot. But then, as you said, the two scouts were cornerbacks in the past, and that's saying something.
Yeah, Emmanuel Forbes is a very good cornerback. He played top competition in the SEC. Very long, lengthy wide receivers. Very good at man-to-man coverage. And overall, he fits with the Commanders' scheme, and they've got a new owner in there. He fits with their current timeline of the team.
I feel like, it actually was a very good pick, Ryan. As you were saying, Mississippi is not looked at very much. And Dawson, also, as you were saying, with their two coaches also being corners back in their day, maybe they see a little bit of themselves in him, and that gives them a promising feeling. So I feel like he is a good pick. And for Christian Gonzalez, I mean, going to not a mainstream, but kind of high up on the level college, that did give him more of a sight out to like the scouts. So I feel like that was the better pick, but maybe we'll see here in a couple of years if it goes the other way.
Yeah, but once again, we'll move forward here. I want to go down the list here to the 20, the pick 20 to pick 23. We saw 4 wide receivers go off the board back to back to back to back. And me personally, I was watching the draft. It was getting pretty late. I went to shower, and when I left, I was like, the Saints could go with a wide receiver. I mean, if Jackson Smith-Njigba is still on the board, I want the Saints to draft him hands down. I think, hey, they might be able to. And I remember I left at pick like 18. I came back, and I'm like, all right, let's see what wide receivers left, and they're all gone. I was very confused what happened, but I think, of course, you look at the Seahawks, they started off the wide receiver trend, you could say, with Jackson Smith-Njigba. He was considered the best wide receiver in the draft for quite a while. I think it was a good pick. Of course, the Seahawks, their wide receiver room is pretty full with DK Metcalf, with Tyler Lockett, and of course now with GSN. But I think it was a solid wide receiver 3, which I think a lot of NFL fans underestimate how important that wide receiver 3 spot is, in that slot spot. Because, of course, as your list goes down for the wide receivers, the opponent's list goes down for the cornerbacks. And if you got a dominant receiver against maybe a lacking cornerback, you're going to take account of that. And I think that's what the Seahawks are trying to build here. And again, building around Geno Smith, which I like. I think Geno Smith had a great year, and although he's getting to age and he has a history of not being the best cornerback or quarterback, I still think it was a good move. And then, of course, you look at the Chargers, you have to Quentin Johnson, Ravens, Zay Flowers, which I love, and then Vikings, Jordan Addison, which I don't know if I really like too much. I think Jordan Addison might have been a bit overhyped just because of his stats, and Caleb Williams throwing the ball to him. So overall, those 4 wide receivers, Ryan, what are your thoughts on those?
I mean, I'm a little bit mad that Jackson Smith-Njigba did not go to the Packers on that one. I was kind of disappointed that we picked a defensive lineman, but I mean, Seattle, I saw something that said after Tyler, what's his name?
Tyler Lockett.
Yeah, Tyler Lockett, but 4 years before, like when he got picked, 4 years before that, what's his name? He was really good with Super Bowl. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Golden Tate.
A wide receiver.
I
couldn't remember. Keep on talking. I'll look it up.
He was a great route runner. That after the 4 years he was drafted, Tyler Lockett got drafted, and 4 years later DK Metcalf got drafted, and then 4 years later Jackson Smith-Njigba got drafted. So I feel like there might be a little superstition right there with drafting a big wide receiver. I feel like he has a lot of potential. I feel like he's going to be pretty good.
So I'm gonna go with
Doug Baldwin.
Yeah, he was really good.
Quentin Johnson, TCU. The trim for the Chargers were to load up on technically the whole TCU offense.
Mm-hmm.
They drafted Matt Duggan late as well, but I feel like he's going to be a very good wide receiver in that room with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. But now Zane Flowers is I don't know how he's going to fit in Baltimore because they just got Antonio Brown that signed. Sure, he's old.
Did the Ravens really? Oh my gosh!
They're bringing back veteran.
There we go.
But,
and OBJ. Yeah.
As we go back to the Seahawks, we can't forget about T.Y. Hilton. I mean, he used to play for the Colts.
Oh, yeah.
I think the Seahawks are a sleeper pick this year for their division. I can see them being number 1. And actually, just to go back to the stats, last year they were second behind the 49ers, and I can see them getting 12 wins this season. They had 9 last year. Of course, the Brock Purdy-led 49ers at 13. And you also wonder for the 49ers, is Brock Purdy going to be that franchise quarterback that we think he's going to be, or was it just a shining year because of injuries?
Yeah, didn't the Ravens last year pick up Deshaun Jackson for a little bit? I'm correct.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
but
so-
I think the Ravens, again, that was definitely an interesting pick, and they're definitely building up on a lot of wide receiver pieces there. And I think that OBJ signing was, you get OBJ, but I think a lot of it was to keep Lamar Jackson. Of course, Lamar just signed that gigantic contract about a week and a half ago. But I want to look at that Quentin Johnson. Of course, Lucas was just mentioning that a bit for the Chargers. And, of course, another situation where he won't even really be a wide receiver number 2 coming out of the board because you still have Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. But I love that pick because you look back to last year, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams had a lot of injury trouble. Keenan Allen's getting to that age. Mike Williams, I think, is around 28, 27 now, but still, I mean, that's going to come pretty fast. And I think a good wide receiver, young guy that can train up under the 2 veterans is definitely a good piece for that. But moving forward now all the way really to the day 2, day 3 as we come back now to around the last 10 minutes of our time here, really just looking at some of our favorite picks for those next couple days too. Of course, day 2 had rounds 2 and 3, and then day 3 had rounds 4 to 7. For day 2, of course, the big news for the about 12 hours or so they had off the draft. The big news was Will Levis still on the board. Of course, he was in the green room. He was the only quarterback left in the green room, and he wasn't even there the second day. He had some personal things to go, so he really had to watch himself get drafted at home. And, of course, the Titans picked him up there. I'm not sure exactly what pick that was, but it was very early. I know that, and it was a great pick, I think, for the Titans. I think maybe not the best for Malik Willis because now you got even more competition. And I think Malik Willis was already having enough trouble kind of building himself up to, I mean, you're not going to pass Ryan Tannehill as long as he's there, but at least show that you can be the guy after Ryan Tannehill leaves. But now with Will Levis on the board, that's going to be some trouble there. So I think he was the second pick in the second round. So I think it was a very solid pick. I like it, but I mean, it's definitely going to be a question mark. And as we were talking about, NFL scouts, NFL coaches might know something about Levis that we don't.
Yeah, I'm surprised Tennessee went with Will Levis with Malik Willis, as you were talking about. I would have thought maybe the Raiders would have picked him up in the second round because you have Jimmy Garoppolo and who's their second string?
Aiden O'Connor now, who they picked later in the draft.
Oh, yeah. That was a Raiders. O'Connell.
Yeah.
Okay, you're talking about the Raiders. Sorry.
Yeah,
I
feel like they would have picked him if he was still on the board, maybe. But Tennessee, maybe they're thinking that they could maybe they trade Malik Willis for something. I don't know what they're thinking right now, but I mean with Derrick Henry in the backfield, I don't think they're very worried about quarterback.
I feel like they could have gone very many different directions because they traded up with the Colts. The Colts had that 4th pick, and the Colts selected a cornerback at the Titans pick, which I think was the best available on the board. But Will Levis and Malik Willis are going to be in contention for that backup role. But the problem is going to be what number is Will Levis going to wear because they both wear number 7.
I mean, yeah, for Will Levis, maybe it's the mayonnaise and the coffee, but I'm not really sure. Anyways, if we go to picks that we personally like, obviously have to go with the Eagles. Them getting all these people out of Georgia. I mean, we go with Keely Ringo and then Moro Ojomo, and even I think Sidney Brown did go. Did he go to Georgia? It was either Georgia or Florida, but either way, later in the first round, they got Nolan Smith at the 30th pick. I feel like he was definitely a sleeper. He went a little bit late just because I know he wasn't like a very bright star at Georgia, but I feel like he was a key piece to their defense. And I just, all around, I personally like what the Eagles did this offseason, obviously bringing in another running back, DeAndre Swift, and re-signing Jalen Hurts. I can see a bright future for the Eagles in this next upcoming season.
Yeah, but looking ahead maybe to another pick that I really liked. Of course, we have just about 6 minutes now, but personally, I loved the Saints pick. I think it was their, let's see, their 6th round. No, pick 195. Yeah, 6th round. So Saints 6th round pick. They went with A.T. Perry out of Wake Forest. I love this pick. A.T. Perry is a very physical guy. He's 6'3". Big dude, 195, so maybe not the biggest, but still for wide receiver, that's decently big. And on top of that, ran a 4.47. He definitely can get it done on those long routes. And one quick stat I wanted to point out here for the Saints, they definitely needed a physical receiver. Last year, I think Michael Thomas had 3 contested catches, and out of the 3 games he played, that was the most on the team for the entire season. So no wide receiver on our team had more than 3 contested catches the entire year. So the Saints' number one in need for the wide receiver spot was a physical guy that can jump up and pull it down like a Michael Thomas type build, who has those great hands, who's decently tall and lengthy. And I think A.T. Perry was exactly that guy, although of course, he was drafted in the 6th round and he won't really be a big name there starting off with the Saints. I still think underneath, and Michael Thomas is coming back, another thing to mention. So I think it's always a question mark for Michael Thomas. Of course, I got excited about him last offseason. That ended disappointingly, but of course, just re-sign him for another year. I think there's still a bit of potential back there with the Saints wide receiver. And I think that if this pick works out and if Michael Thomas stays, gets back to his 2018 self, I think the Saints could be a huge contender, a very surprising dark horse team. I mean, if Michael Thomas works out, Chris Olave, you got Rashid Shaheed, which I think is the most underrated wide receiver in the league. And on top of that, a young guy, A.T. Perry. I love the Saints pick there, and that was definitely my favorite of the 6th round.
Yeah, for me, my favorite team is the Packers, and I really like their second round pick with Jaden Reed out of Michigan State, one of the best on that team. But there was a few rumors saying that because their other star wide receiver did go into the transfer portal this year, saying, I guess they were talking about how they had so much more potential than they had, like how much their stat line wasn't very good, but I guess their quarterback wasn't that good. There was a few rumors saying that he could be really good if he had a good quarterback thrown into him. I feel like they were thinking about if Jordan Love does do the same thing as what Aaron Rodgers did, after people saying with our luckiness with quarterbacks, I feel like it's going to be pretty good.
So I have 2 picks I really like. So my first one is round 3 for my favorite team, the Colts. Josh Downs out of North Carolina. He's a very good pick, and he can play that slot receiver spot. He's not the biggest weight-wise, only weighs 175, but my second favorite pick is in the 5th round. The Cleveland Browns selected Darnell Thompson-Robinson, the QB out of UCLA. He's a very physical guy like Cam Newton, has the size and speed, and he had 4 years at UCLA, who under Chip Kelly had a very good offense, but he had a chance to learn from Deshaun Watson and Josh Downs, who's been around the league.
All right, so with that, that'll do it for our podcast here today. We hope you all enjoyed. For Ryan Davis, Lucas Carton, and Aiden Wilson, I'm Dawson Peril. Once again, you can expect episodes every single Wednesday around at this point is what our schedule will be looking like. But with that, we hope you all enjoyed. Have a nice day. You're listening to the Arabian Sports Talk, 91.7 WEEM.